System startup initiated. You are accessing the BULLDOZER CORE OS V9.9.9 geopolitical systems audit.
Confirming.
I am verifying the active telemetry stream.
Telemetry is concerned. Signal integrity is stable. You are reviewing this system telemetry to understand the current operational reality of the Western Hemisphere.
The fundamental baseline for this audit is absolute. It requires you to execute a complete cognitive reset. The era of narrative diplomacy is dead.
Entirely dead. Multilateralism, the Organization of American States diplomatic summits built on press releases and memorandums of understanding. These are legacy operating systems.
20th century code.
Correct. They have been formatted. Power has migrated entirely to hard infrastructure, to logistical integration, and to engineering-based clearance.
Our mission for this deep dive into the source telemetry is precise. We will analyze the new hemispheric architecture currently deploying across the Americas.
We will evaluate the synchronization of regional nodes within this framework.
And critically, we will audit the systemic failure of the Brazilian partition.
As you review this briefing, you must strip the world of political rhetoric, reduce it to raw hardware,
Protocol requirements.
and data flows. We are not analyzing ideologies here. We are analyzing supply chains, orbital networks, and kinetic enforcement.
The logistical OS does not judge morally.
It only calculates efficiency, alignment, security.
We begin with the catalyst event. I am pulling up Block 1 telemetry. It locates us at the Trump National Doral in Miami, Florida.
The timestamp on this packet is March 7, 2026.
This location is mathematically and strategically significant. It sits precisely at the nexus of the United States Southern Command's area of responsibility.
Southcom, yes. And the primary financial arteries connecting North and South America. This exact location represents the injection point for the new systemic architecture.
Now, institutional media pushes a very specific narrative about what happened in Miami. We must apply the binary contrast. While the software version pushed by media and governments says this is a diplomatic summit for regional cooperation under Trump, focusing on security, migration, organized crime, and investment, the hardware version, the bulldozer realpolitik, audits and executes this as the official boot sequence of the America Shield Alliance. It is the physical soldering of the hemispheric shield. Pause.
That physical soldering is the critical differentiator in this audit. This event must be understood strictly as the hard coding of the new hemispheric order.
The guest list. Let's look at the notes.
12 ideologically aligned countries are present at this summit. They are not there to negotiate treaties.
No, negotiation implies leverage.
Exactly. And in this architecture, the nodes have zero leverage against the core. They are present strictly to receive their integration patches.
Break down the parameters of those patches. What exactly is being downloaded into these national systems at Doral?
The patches consist of 3 strictly defined data streams. First is capital access. This is the exclusive routing of U.S. Development Finance Corporation, or DFC funds. This is designed to physically replace Chinese infrastructure loans.
Second stream.
Technology transfer. The hard integration of synchronized defense and communication grids. And the third stream is security routing. Absolute kinetic protection under the U.S. umbrella.
The guest list for this boot sequence is essentially a precise map of nodes that have demonstrated an acceptable geopolitical SLA, a service-level agreement.
The system registers the physical presence of leadership from Argentina,
Ecuador,
El Salvador, Paraguay, Panama,
Guyana, the Dominican Republic,
Chile, Uruguay, Costa Rica, Guatemala, and Honduras.
These nodes have initiated the sync process. However, the telemetry highlights a glaring, massive structural void.
Brazil
Is excluded.
completely. And this exclusion is not a diplomatic oversight. It is not a temporary political snub.
In the strict framework of the BULLDOZER CORE OS, it is a deliberate, highly visible system signal from the core command.
Brazil, under its current management matrix, is flagged by the core not as a reliable partner,
Not even as a competitor.
strictly as a failed partition.
Define the parameters of a failed partition for this audit.
A failed partition is a sector of the geopolitical hard drive that is actively corrupted by competing code. It simply cannot be trusted to route critical data, minerals, or capital.
The core does not negotiate with corrupted sectors.
It does not send diplomats to patch them, it isolates them. The goal is to prevent systemic latency and bandwidth contamination across the rest of the network.
We will audit the specific mathematics of Brazil's Cuarantine in Block 4. But the baseline reality established in Miami is that the largest landmass in South America has been physically locked out of the system.
Which brings us to Block 2, We need to define the exact architecture that was deployed and activated at that Miami boot sequence.
The system designates this framework as the ASA, the America Healed Alliance.
Analysts outside the firewall fundamentally misread this structure. We apply the binary contrast. While the software version says the ASA is an institutional alliance of countries aiming to strengthen mutual trade and security, the hardware version, the bulldozer realpolitik, audits and executes this as the hardware layer of the new hemispheric order, designed to completely decouple the region from Chinese logistical architecture.
Pause. Both of us need to state and dissect the operational rule of the ASA.
It is not an agreement.
It is architecture.
It is not an option.
It is protocol.
Let's verify that telemetry. If it is protocol, what is the physical infrastructure enforcing it? You cannot simply declare a decoupling from Beijing without the hardware to replace their footprint.
Correct. To understand this architecture, we must analyze the hemispheric firewall.
Structurally, the system defines this as the Iron Trinity.
The Iron Trinity. This is the physical and digital tech stack that enforces absolute protection.
An absolute compliance. For all synchronized nodes, a nation simply cannot maintain an active geopolitical SLA without fully integrating all three components of this trinity.
I am pulling up the schematics for the first component. The system designates this as the Starshield, operating as the orbital kernel. Give me the technical specifications and the strategic output of this layer.
Starshield is military-grade orbital surveillance deployed in low Earth orbit. It provides low-latency communications.
Registering consistently at under 20 milliseconds.
Yes, sub-20 millisecond latency, and persistent, high-fidelity tracking across every square meter of the hemisphere.
We are talking about synthetic aperture radar.
Electro-optical sensors.
Signal intelligence capabilities that operate 24/7.
They are completely immune to terrestrial weather or sovereign airspace restrictions.
Structurally and psychologically, the orbital kernel changes the math. By rendering the hemisphere virtually invulnerable to external hypersonic or cyber-physical threats, it fundamentally removes the cost of fear from the U.S. Core Command.
Exactly. When you strip away the narrative, geopolitical hesitation usually stems from vulnerability. The orbital kernel ensures 99.9% uptime for the logistical OS in the Americas.
Because the Core Command knows its own hemisphere is a mathematically sealed environment.
It allows the bulldozer mechanism to operate far more aggressively in other global theaters.
The Indo-Pacific, Eastern Europe.
Yes, without the risk of asymmetric retaliation on domestic or near-domestic soil.
But orbital dominance is only the top layer. The telemetry indicates a massive infrastructure hurdle on the ground for these nodes, specifically regarding telecommunications.
The second mandatory component for a node's geopolitical SLA is the Yuan virus purge.
Detail the exact parameters of this protocol.
The Yuan virus is categorized by the system as it is non-negotiable. All synced nodes are mandated to execute a physical rip and replace of all Huawei and ZTE infrastructure within their borders.
I am looking at the logistics of this. The capital expenditure requirement is immense. The system is demanding that developing nations tear out billions of dollars of installed cellular and data hardware.
Furthermore, this system mandates a strict 120-day window for execution.
From an engineering standpoint, how is that physical latency managed? How do you replace a national grid in 120 days?
It is managed through brute force capital injection. The Core Command does not issue the purge order without simultaneously routing DFC capital to fund the replacement hardware.
Hardware sourced strictly from trusted, closed-loop vendors.
Ericsson, Nokia, U.S.-based domestic integrators. But the 120-day timeline is the ultimate test of sovereignty. If a nation's internal bureaucracy or embedded Chinese influence prevents them from executing the purge within that exact window, the node fails the SLA.
And the consequence of that failure?
Immediate packet dropping.
Total disconnection.
The nation is completely disconnected from the Starshield architecture and physically locked out of U.S. capital markets. The Core Command views Chinese 6G not as telecom equipment. It views it as a direct, unencrypted intelligence pipeline to Beijing.
The 120-day purge is required to prevent bandwidth contamination from the rival Red Bandwidth Counter OS.
You cannot run secure U.S. logistical data over hardware that answers to Shenzhen. It is a mathematical impossibility.
Well, understood. The third component of the Iron Trinity shifts from defense and telecom to the raw economic engine of the ASA. RWA tokenization.
Real-world assets.
The system mandates that all critical resources must be mapped, verified, and tokenized.
To understand RWA tokenization, you have to look at Argentina's lithium or Guyana's offshore oil reserves. Instead of traditional trade agreements, which are highly vulnerable to political shifting or opaque Chinese forward purchasing contracts, the physical output of these resources is digitized,
They are tokenized into verifiable data points on an exclusive, audited blockchain.
monitored continuously by Core Command.
So we are translating physical strategic minerals into cryptographic hashes. Explain how this enforces the geopolitical decoupling.
It creates absolute supply chain traceability. Let's say a ton of lithium is extracted in the Argentine salar. That specific unit of lithium is assigned a cryptographic token.
The ledger records exactly who mined it.
What equipment was used? Where the capital came from? If that token does not have a cryptographic signature proving it was extracted and processed completely independent of Chinese infrastructure or capital, it is immediately flagged.
Treated as an unverified packet.
Precisely. It is blocked at the firewall boundary. It cannot be sold into the North American electric vehicle market. It cannot receive DFC financing.
This tokenization guarantees global liquidity for compliant assets while completely bypassing reliance on Chinese market consumption.
It physically enforces the clean network standard down to the molecular level of raw minerals.
Now that we have established the architecture of the firewall, we must audit the physical hardware running it. Transitioning to block 3, we access the synchronization map.
System telemetry points to 13 specific national nodes present at the Miami boot sequence.
We need to categorize them by their explicit assigned functions within the logistical OS. Let's begin with the kernel nodes.
The most critical telemetry here comes from Buenos Aires. The system confirms Argentina, under the administration of Javier Milei, has achieved 100% synchronization with the core.
Institutional media portrays this through a political lens. We apply the binary contract. While the software version portrays Argentina's shift as a political victory for free market ideology, the hardware version, the bulldozer realpolitik, audits and executes Argentina as a fully integrated market stabilizer, rewarded with development finance corporation capital, and structurally hardwired as a clean mineral hub for the logistical OS.
Pause. The ideology of the node is entirely irrelevant to the system. The physical output is what matters. Argentina has vast reserves of lithium, copper, and shale gas in Vaca Muerta.
By achieving 100% sync, Milei's government successfully formatted the previous administration's currency swaps with Beijing.
In return, the ASA integrated Argentina as the primary clean mineral hub for the Southern Hemisphere. DXE capital is flowing directly into their infrastructure to ensure those RWA tokens remain inside the Golden Dome.
The telemetry identifies Ecuador, under Noboa, as the second kernel node. Ecuador does not have the sheer mass of Argentina. Why is it categorized as a kernel node?
Location and critical vulnerability. Ecuador functions as the stabilizing hardware securing the Andean arc.
Prior to this update, Ecuador was highly susceptible to state collapse malware.
Specifically, transnational narco cartels acting as proxy destabilizers. These networks were often utilizing illicit Chinese fentanyl precursors and shadow money laundering networks.
By upgrading Ecuador to a kernel node, the core command physically hardwired security protocols into the port of Guayaquil.
They're utilizing JTF Gold advisory elements, which we will audit in Block 5. Ecuador is the firewall preventing systemic corruption from spreading down the Pacific coast.
Next, we audit the strategic valves. These are the physical choke points of the hemispheric hardware. The system highlights Panama, under Mulino, as the most vital geographical asset.
The system classifies Panama strictly as the aortic valve of the logistical OS.
The Panama Canal is the single most critical vulnerability in the global supply chain. It handles a massive percentage of U.S. commercial and military shipping.
However, the canal has been suffering from severe throughput latency, systemic drought, and critically low water levels in Gatun Lake.
Furthermore, Chinese state-owned enterprises had been steadily acquiring port terminal leases at both ends of the canal.
How does the ASA protocol address this latency and contamination? The aortic valve requires physical flow integrity. Any latency in Panama threatens the entire organism.
Under the ASA framework, the core command essentially asserts operational override.
Chinese PERT leases are systematically being audited and voided under the RWA tokenization security parameters.
The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and DFC capital are being aggressively deployed to re-engineer the water management systems. Panama is not allowed to fail.
It is physically forced into efficiency.
The telemetry shows Guyana serving as the second strategic valve. Its categorization is highly specific.
It is the critical energy node feeding compliant high-yield energy directly into the Golden Dome architecture.
Guyana is currently sitting on some of the largest, lowest break-even offshore oil discoveries in the world, managed largely by U.S. supermajors.
However, it borders a highly volatile, unsynced territory in Venezuela. and the failed partition of Brazil to its south.
Guyana's function is to pump massive, secure energy bandwidth into the U.S. market.
This system guarantees Guyana's physical borders via the Starshield and kinetic deterrence. In exchange, Guyana routes its petroleum entirely within the ASA economic protocols.
The architecture also requires dedicated security nodes to maintain internal network integrity against asymmetric threats. El Salvador, under Bukele, is mapped as the primary security model and intelligence hub.
Bukele's administration essentially open-sourced a highly effective kinetic security protocol.
The total suppression of gang networks via mass incarceration and the suspension of legacy judicial latency.
The Core Command audited this output and found it highly compatible with the BULLDOZER CORE OS. El Salvador now functions as an intelligence-sharing hub,
Exporting its anti-cartel tactical data to other synced nodes, ensuring the entire network is immunized against the state collapse malware we discussed in Ecuador.
Alongside El Salvador, the Dominican Republic operates as the secondary security node. Its function is strictly geographical,
Physically securing the maritime routes, specifically the Mona Passage.
and preventing unauthorized packet transfer, meaning illicit drug or migrant, flows through the Caribbean sectors.
Finally, we must audit the regional connectors. These are the passageways for prioritized logistics.
This group includes Chile under CAST, Uruguay under LACAL, Paraguay managing the Hidrovia routing,
Costa Rica, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. I want to isolate Paraguay in this telemetry. Explain the Hidrovia routing and why it is critical to the logistical passageways.
The Paraná-Paraguay waterway, or Hidrovia, is a massive river system that flows south into the Atlantic. For decades, it has been a logistical battleground,
Paraguay, uniquely, has maintained diplomatic ties with Taiwan.
inherently making it resistant to the UN virus. As a synchronized regional connector, Paraguay is receiving direct U.S. engineering support to dredge and secure the Hidrovia.
This allows immense volumes of tokenized agricultural commodities, soybeans, beef, to be exported cleanly.
Completely bypassing the logistical bottleneck and political instability of the Brazilian partition entirely.
We must audit the operational reality of the integration patch across all 13 of these nodes.
The system dictates that nodes that synchronize receive immediate and exclusive benefits.
We are tracking unfettered access to core capital, priority routing for all logistics, and nearshored supply chains migrating from Asia.
And continuous, persistent military deterrence provided by the Golden Dome.
The binary logic of the system is absolute. It is a mathematical certainty.
If you sync, you prosper operationally. Your GDP grows. Your infrastructure modernizes. Your security is guaranteed.
If you do not sync, you are locked out of the firewall.
You cannot access the US dollar market. You cannot sell your minerals to Western tech companies. You are treated as systemic junk.
This ruthless binary logic forces us to examine Block 4, the failed partition.
The system telemetry isolating Brazil provides a stark, quantifiable visualization of hardware consequences.
Our system diagnosis categorizes Brazil strictly as a failed partition. Looking at the raw data, the Brazilian hardware is currently operating in a critical, highly unstable dual boot state.
The diplomatic corps tries to frame this differently. Apply the binary contrast. While the software version suggests Brazil is navigating a multipolar world by maintaining diplomatic ties with both the West and the global South, the hardware version, the bulldozer realpolitik, audits and executes this as an impossible technical contradiction, attempting to run the US dollar OS and the Chinese yuan OS simultaneously, triggering a permanent system quarantine. Pause.
In pure engineering terms, a dual boot system where both operating systems are trying to access the same hard drive simultaneously will inevitably corrupt the disk.
The logistical OS does not permit dual masters. The current Brazilian administration's strategy of flirting with core command for environmental funds, while actively relying on BRICS integration, Chinese debt trap infrastructure, and Huawei telecom networks, is a fatal error code.
The system's response is automatic. Quarantine.
The telemetry maps this quarantine geographically as a logistical encirclement.
It is categorized as a slow choke protocol. Look at the map provided in the audit. The encirclement is physically absolute. Let's read the geographical data.
To the north, Brazil's access to the Caribbean and North Atlantic is walled off by synchronized nodes, Panama and Guyana.
To the west, its access to the Pacific is blocked by Chile and the Bolivia Paz node, which is heavily monitored by the Starshield.
To the south, it is isolated by the fully synced kernel node of Argentina and the tech hub of Uruguay.
And to the southeast, its riverine access is strictly controlled by Paraguay. Brazil is entirely surrounded by nodes operating inside the Golden Dome.
They are effectively sealed inside a logistical Faraday cage.
I need to audit the mathematical consequences of this quarantine. Strip away all geopolitical emotion and reduce this to pure data. What is the physical cost of this isolation?
Projections for the first 12 months post-Miami summit detail immense structural damage to the Brazilian partition. The system calculates a direct loss of 47 to 62 billion US dollars in foreign direct investment.
Verify the mechanics of that capital flight. Where exactly is that money routing to?
The capital is simply rerouted to synced nodes. Western tech companies looking to manufacture EV batteries or data centers cannot build in Brazil because the Brazilian telecom grid is contaminated by the Yuan virus.
They cannot tokenize their assets there.
Therefore, the FDI flows south to Argentina or west to Chile. Brazil suffers from immediate strategic obsolescence.
Further telemetry indicates a projected drop of 2.3 to 3.1% in potential GDP over a 24-month cycle. We need to look at the agribusiness sector. This is the core of the Brazilian export economy.
The system models a 15 to 20% loss of market share in agribusiness. Because Brazil is locked out of the priority passageways, its logistical latency increases.
Meanwhile, cheaper, highly synchronized neighbors like Paraguay and Uruguay enjoy zero-tariff access within the firewall and U.S.-engineered river systems.
The global market simply routes around the Brazilian bottleneck to purchase cheaper, cleaner agricultural packets from the synced nodes.
Additionally, the telemetry confirms Brazil faces total exclusion from DFC credit lines, denying them the capital required for secure reindustrialization.
They're also entirely cut off from the regional security intelligence protocols shared by El Salvador and the core.
This brings us to the ultimate system parameter, the flip or choke ultimatum.
The system has identified a narrow window of opportunity for the partition, timed exactly for the Brazilian national elections in October 2026.
The parameter is entirely binary. Detail the sequence of the ultimatum.
Either the nation completely formats its corrupted system, meaning the absolute dismantling of its BRICS alignment and Chinese infrastructure, and executes a strict re-entry protocol within 72 hours of a right-wing, core-aligned electoral victory. Or it accepts permanent asphyxiation as a vassal node to the red bandwidth.
72 hours. That is an incredibly tight operational window for a landmass of that size to execute a geopolitical format.
It is the absolute requirement of the system. If a compliant administration takes power, they must immediately initiate the Yuan virus purge and request emergency DFC bridging capital.
If they fail, or if the current administration remains, the firewall hardens permanently.
There is no third way. Hardware truth dictates this outcome. The mathematics of the global supply chain will simply crush the isolated partition over the next decade.
To understand how this quarantine and the broader firewall are enforced physically in the event of an anomaly or a breach, we must access Block 5. The blade.
The system designates this kinetic enforcement mechanism as JTF Gold, Joint Task Force Gold.
We must transition our analysis from the digital and economic quarantine, the slow choke, to the physical kinetic arm of the ASA.
JTF Gold is the elite Joint Task Force permanently stationed at the former Howard Air Base in Panama.
The narrative surrounding this deployment is heavily sanitized. Time for the binary contrast. While the software version portrays this as a joint military exercise to promote regional stability and combat transnational crime, the hardware version, the bulldozer realpolitik, audits and executes JTF Gold as the physical enforcement blade of the logistical OS, merging high-fidelity U.S. core command units with special forces from synced nodes like Argentina, Ecuador, and El Salvador. Pause.
To understand why JTF Gold exists at this massive scale, we must look at the technical requirement of the logistical OS. The system demands zero latency in its physical response mechanisms.
Define zero latency in a kinetic military context. Relying on legacy deployment protocols, scrambling assets from the continental United States, or waiting for UN Security Council resolutions introduces unacceptable delay.
In the era of hypersonic missiles and cyber-physical infrastructure sabotage, a delay of 48 hours is equivalent to a total system failure.
Exactly. By stationing JTF Gold at the aortic valve in Panama, integrating U.S. heavy lift transport, special operations strike teams, and regional SOF units into a single command structure, the ASA guarantees kinetic intervention anywhere in the hemisphere in under 4 hours.
I am pulling up the operational parameters of JTF Gold. They are governed by strict programmatic trigger protocols.
These are not debated in a congressional committee. They are automated if-then execution sequences. Let's run through the trigger protocols. Level 1 is a cyber attack.
If a sync node experiences a breach, for example, a ransomware attack on Uruguay's financial sector or Chile's grid, it automatically triggers remote control and mitigation protocols.
JTF cyber units at Howard Air Base immediately override the local network. They isolate the infected servers and deploy countermeasures without waiting for a formal diplomatic request.
Level 2 escalates to a threat to RWA. Tokenized assets are the lifeblood of the system.
Give me a tactical scenario for a Level 2 trigger.
Suppose a hostile proxy group attempts to occupy an audited lithium processing facility in Argentina, threatening the supply chain. This triggers rapid physical mobilization.
JTF units deploy via low-orbit infiltration or rapid air transport to immediately secure the resource.
The mandate is not to police the area. The mandate is strictly to bring the RWA token back online.
Level 3 is a kinetic attack against any node within the firewall. This could be a conventional state actor strike or a massive cartel offensive utilizing military-grade hardware.
The Level 3 trigger instantly activates the integrated air defense grid, utilizing the Starshield tracking data.
Aegis ashore systems and Patriot batteries integrated across the kernel nodes link into a single targeting matrix,
Neutralizing the threat autonomously, while JTF Gold executes a decapitation strike on the origin of the attack.
Finally, we audit Level 4, the blockade of choke points.
Any disruption to strategic valves like Panama or major logistical passageways, such as the hydrovia routing, triggers this response.
If a hostile actor attempts to mine the Panama Canal, or if a rogue state blockades the maritime routes near the Dominican Republic, it triggers immediate conventional military intervention by JTF Gold.
They do not issue warnings. They execute overwhelming force to clear the blockage and restore system uptime. The flow of global commerce must register at 100%.
We have now mapped the event at Miami, the architecture of the Iron Trinity, the synchronization of the nodes,
The isolation of the failed partition.
and the kinetic enforcement blade of JTF Gold. We must process the final synthesis of the updated hemispheric map.
The architect's verdict is exceptionally clear. The era of multilateral diplomacy, of narrative negotiation, and non-aligned posturing has been fully formatted.
It is deleted from the hard drive.
The hemisphere has successfully rebooted under the BULLDOZER CORE OS.
The system has optimized for logistical flow, absolute security, and unyielding alignment. The hardware truth has replaced diplomatic ambiguity.
You, reviewing this telemetry, must now audit your own localized environment. Look closely at your nation's infrastructure, your supply chains, the physical hardware powering your 6G networks, and the origin of your national debt.
Ask yourself the most critical question of the decade. Are you operating securely inside the Golden Dome, processing clean RWA tokens, and protected by zero-latency kinetic enforcement?
Or are you unknowingly living inside a failed partition? Are you existing in a system infected by the yuan virus, waiting for the inevitable blue screen of economic starvation and logistical collapse?
The map before you is completely binary. The legacy operating systems will not save you. Synchronize or be formatted.
Logistical way, status protectionable, hardware no meant.